The morning sun was just beginning to warm the air when Alex woke up. It was Saturday, the day he'd been looking forward to all week. No school, no chores until the afternoon, and the perfect weather for exploring. His mom was still asleep, and he quietly made himself a peanut butter sandwich, wrapped it in plastic and slipped it into his backpack along with his water bottle and the small digital camera he'd gotten for his 12th birthday. Alex lived with his mom in a small house just a 15-minute walk from Lake Morrison. The lake wasn't anything special to most people in town, just a large body of water with some ducks and the occasional fisherman. But to Alex, it was a place of endless possibilities. Every weekend he would walk around its shores taking pictures of interesting bugs, unusual rocks, or the way light reflected off the water. Today felt different somehow. Maybe it was because he'd dreamed about finding treasure the night before. Or maybe it was just the extra spring in his step from the perfect weather, but Alex decided to go further around the lake than he usually did. "I'll be back for lunch," he called out to his mom, who was now in the kitchen making coffee. She nodded sleepily, used to his Saturday morning adventures. "Just keep your phone on and don't go near the water alone," she reminded him. The same words she said every weekend. Alex promised and headed out the door. The streets were quiet at this hour. A few cars passed by, probably heading to the farmer's market that opened early on Saturdays. Alex walked with purpose, his sneakers making a satisfying rhythm on the sidewalk. He loved this time of day when it felt like he had the whole world to himself. When he reached the lake, he took a deep breath. The air smelled different here, a mix of water, plants, and earth. A few ducks paddled near the shore, and he could see ripples where fish were jumping further out. He took his camera out and snapped a few pictures of the morning light on the water. The usual path he took went to the right, leading to the public docks and the small beach area where families would come later in the day. But today, something pulled him to the left, toward the less visited side of the lake where the shore was rockier, and trees grew closer to the water. Alex had only been this way a couple of times before. The path was less maintained, with tall grass sometimes covering parts of it. But that's what made it interesting. It felt more wild, more like he was really exploring. He walked for about 20 minutes, stopping occasionally to take pictures or look at something interesting. A uniquely shaped rock, a bright orange mushroom growing on a fallen log, a blue jay that watched him from a branch before flying away. The path curved around a small bay, and as Alex followed it, he noticed an old wooden dock jutting out into the water. It looked like it had been abandoned years ago. The wood was gray with age, and parts of it had collapsed into the water. A no trespassing sign hung crookedly on a post, but it was so faded that the words were barely visible. Alex's curiosity got the better of him. He looked around to make sure no one was watching, then carefully stepped onto the dock. The wood creaked under his feet, but it seemed solid enough. He walked slowly, testing each board before putting his full weight on it. At the end of the dock, he sat down, letting his legs dangle above the water. From here, he could see a part of the lake that wasn't visible from the shore, a small cove surrounded by trees whose branches hung low over the water. It was peaceful here. He took out his camera and snapped a few more pictures. As he was about to get up and continue his walk, something caught his eye, a flash of light from the shore near the base of the dock. At first, he thought it might be a piece of glass or a can reflecting the sunlight, but something about it made him curious. Alex carefully made his way back to shore and over to the spot where he'd seen the reflection. The area was muddy with reeds growing thick around it. He had to be careful not to get his sneakers too dirty. His mom would definitely notice that. Pushing aside some of the reeds, Alex peered down at the mud. There it was again, something metallic catching the light. It was mostly buried with just a small corner visible. He squatted down for a better look. Whatever it wasn't just trash. The visible part seemed to have some kind of design on it. Alex's heart beat a little faster. This was exactly the kind of discovery he'd always hoped to make on his explorations. He looked around for something to use to dig it out, and found a sturdy stick nearby. Carefully, he began to poke at the mud around the object, trying not to damage it. The mud was wet and sticky, making the job harder than he expected. After a few minutes, his hands were dirty and his patience was starting to wear thin. "Just a little more," he muttered to himself, digging the stick deeper into the mud. Finally, he felt the stick hit something solid. He wiggled it underneath the object and slowly, carefully lifted. The mud released its grip, and Alex found himself looking at a small metal box about the size of a hardcover book. It was caked with mud, but he could see that it was made of some kind of metal. Not aluminum like a soda can, but something heavier. Brass maybe, or copper. It had turned greenish in places from being in the water. Whoa, Alex breathed. He wiped some of the mud off with his sleeve, revealing intricate patterns engraved on the surface. It looked old, really old. And it had a small lock on the front, also caked with mud and rust. He sat back on his heels, staring at his find. Questions raced through his mind. How old was this box? What was inside it? How had it ended up buried in the mud by an abandoned dock? The weight of the box suggested there was something inside. He shook it gently and heard a muffled sound like papers or fabric moving around. His watch beeped, the alarm he'd set to remind himself when to head back home for lunch. But Alex couldn't bear the thought of leaving his discovery behind. After a moment's hesitation, he decided to take it with him. He wrapped the box in the small towel he always carried in his backpack for emergencies and carefully placed it inside. The walk back seemed to take forever. The box felt heavy in his backpack, like it was pulling him down with the weight of its secrets. Alex couldn't stop thinking about what might be inside. Treasure? Old letters? Photos? Or maybe just mud and water that had seeped in over the years. When he passed by the main part of the lake, it was starting to fill with people enjoying the nice weather. A family was setting up a picnic. A couple of older men were fishing from the public dock, and a woman was walking her dog along the shore. None of them knew that Alex carried something potentially amazing in his backpack. The thought made him feel special, like he was carrying a wonderful secret. As he walked, he decided not to tell his mom right away. She might make him turn the box into the local historical society, or the police without ever finding out what was inside. No, first he would clean it up and try to open it. Then, depending on what he found, he would decide what to do next. By the time he reached home, his mind was buzzing with plans. He would need tools to clean the box without damaging it. Maybe his neighbor, Mr. Chen, could help. He was always working on old cars and had all kinds of tools and cleaning supplies in his garage. "You're back early," his mom said when he walked in the door. She was sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop, probably working on one of her articles. She was a freelance writer and often worked weekends. "Yeah, it got crowded," Alex said, which wasn't exactly a lie. He tried to keep his voice casual, though his heart was racing with excitement about his find. "Did you take any good pictures?" she asked, looking up from her screen with a smile. "A few," he said. "I'm going to go clean up and look at them." As he headed to his room, the box a reassuring weight in his backpack, Alex couldn't help but feel that his life was about to change. He had found something special, something with history. What stories might this box tell? What secrets might it reveal? Little did he know just how right he was, and how the muddy old box from the lake would lead to a discovery that would surprise not just him, but the entire town. Alex closed his bedroom door and carefully took the box out of his backpack. In the better light of his room, he could see just how old it looked. The greenish tint on the metal reminded him of the copper statues they had seen on a school trip to the city museum last year. His teacher had explained how copper turns green over time when exposed to air and water. He placed the box on some old newspapers he'd spread on his desk and examined it more closely. Despite being caked with mud and showing signs of age, the box seemed surprisingly intact. The lock was rusted shut, and Alex knew he wouldn't be able to open it without help. For the next hour, he gently cleaned away the mud using an old toothbrush and a bowl of warm water. As the dirt washed away, intricate patterns emerged on the surface, swirling designs and what looked like tiny flowers or stars. On the top of the box, he uncovered what appeared to be initials, EW, barely visible after years underwater, but definitely there. "Alex." "Lunch is ready," his mom called from the kitchen. "Coming," he answered, quickly drying the box with a towel and hiding it in his desk drawer. He washed his hands thoroughly in the bathroom, making sure no traces of mud remained that might make his mom suspicious. Over sandwiches and apple slices, Alex's mind kept wandering back to the box. Who was EW? How long had the box been in the lake? And most importantly, what was inside? "You're quiet today," his mom said, interrupting his thoughts. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, just thinking about a science project," he lied, feeling a twinge of guilt. He rarely kept secrets from his mom, but this felt different somehow. He wanted to discover what was in the box before sharing it with anyone else. After lunch, Alex remembered Mr. Chen was usually in his garage on Saturday afternoons. The retired mechanic had always been friendly to Alex, sometimes showing him how to fix things or letting him look at the vintage car he was restoring. "Mom, I'm going to see if Mr. Chen needs any help with his car," Alex said, a plan forming in his mind. His mom looked up from her laptop with a smile. "That's nice of you. Be back by dinner, okay?" Alex carefully placed the box back in his backpack and headed next door. As expected, Mr. Chen was in his garage, a radio playing old songs as he worked on the engine of his 1965 Ford Mustang. "Hey there, young neighbor," Mr. Chen said, looking up from his work. He was in his 70s with gray hair and hands that showed years of mechanical work, but his eyes were sharp and kind. "Come to see the old beauty?" "Actually," Alex said, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, "I was wondering if you could help me with something." Mr. Chen wiped his hands on a rag. "What's that?" Alex took a deep breath and pulled out the box. "I found this by the lake today. It's locked, and I was hoping you might know how to open it without breaking it." Mr. Chen's eyebrows shot up as he took the box carefully in his hands. Well, what do we have here?" He turned it over, examining the lock and the design. "This is old, Alex, very old. Where exactly did you find it?" Alex explained about the abandoned dock and how the box had been buried in the mud. As he talked, Mr. Chen listened carefully, occasionally nodding. "And you cleaned it up yourself?" "Not bad," he said when Alex finished. "You did a good job not scratching the metal." He looked at the box thoughtfully. "The lock is too rusted to use a key even if we had one, but I think I can open it without damaging the box itself." He led Alex to his workbench, which was organized with tools of all shapes and sizes. "My father was a locksmith," Mr. Chen explained as he selected a few small tools. "He taught me a thing or two." Alex watched, fascinated, as Mr. Chen's skilled hands worked on the old lock. It took nearly 20 minutes of careful manipulation before they heard a satisfying click. "There we go," Mr. Chen said, a note of triumph in his voice. He didn't open the box, though, instead handing it back to Alex. "It's your find. You should be the one to see what's inside first." Alex's heart pounded as he carefully lifted the lid. The inside of the box was lined with what looked like dark red velvet, now faded and water-stained but still intact. And nestled in that velvet were several items: a small leather-bound book, a stack of yellowed papers tied with a faded ribbon, a few photographs, and something that made Alex gasp: a necklace with a small golden pendant. "Well, I'll be," Mr. Chen whispered, leaning closer. "That's quite a find, young man." Alex carefully lifted out the leather book first. The pages were stuck together in places, but miraculously, much of it seemed readable. Opening to a random page, he saw handwriting in faded ink. The date at the top read April 17th, 1938. "It's some kind of diary," Alex said, his voice hushed with awe. Next, he gently untied the ribbon around the papers. They were letters, he realized, each in its own envelope. The envelopes were addressed to Eleanor Winters at an address right here in town. "Eleanor Winters," Alex repeated. "E.W., those are the initials on the box." The photographs were stuck together, and Alex was afraid to pull them apart for fear of damaging them. But he could see the corner of one. It showed a young woman in old-fashioned clothes standing by what looked like the very same lake where he'd found the box. Finally, he carefully picked up the necklace. The pendant was in the shape of a small heart, with what looked like a tiny diamond in the center. "This stuff must be really old," Alex said, looking up at Mr. Chen. "And really important to someone." Mr. Chen nodded slowly. "Things like this aren't just thrown away, Alex. This box was hidden. Maybe on purpose, maybe not. But there's a story here, no doubt about it." Alex's mind was racing. Who was Eleanor Winters? Why were her precious things hidden in a box by the lake? And what did the diary and letters say? What should I do with it all? Alex asked, suddenly feeling the weight of responsibility. These weren't just old things. They were pieces of someone's life. Mr. Chen thought for a moment. "Well, first, we need to make sure these items don't get damaged further. The paper and photos need to dry properly." He looked at Alex with a serious expression. "And then, I think we need to find out more about this Eleanor Winters. If she has any family still around, they might want these things." "How do we do that?" Alex asked. "I know just the person who can help," Mr. Chen said with a smile. "My wife's cousin volunteers at the Historical Society downtown. She knows everything about the old families in this town." He checked his watch. It's too late to call her today, but we can go see her tomorrow if your mom says it's okay. Alex carefully placed everything back in the box, his mind whirling with questions. He had come to Mr. Chen expecting just to get the box open, but now he realized his discovery was turning into something much bigger, a real mystery from the past. Thanks for your help, Mr. Chen, Alex said as he prepared to head home. Can we keep this between us for now? Just until we find out more? Mr. Chen gave him a thoughtful look. I understand wanting to solve the mystery yourself, but you should tell your mom about this, Alex. She'd want to know, and she might even be able to help. Deep down, Alex knew Mr. Chen was right. His mom had always encouraged his curiosity and adventures, and keeping a secret this big from her didn't feel right. I'll tell her tonight, Alex promised. Walking back to his house, the box once again safely in his backpack, Alex felt like he was carrying not just objects but pieces of a puzzle. A real-life puzzle about real people who had lived long ago. The thought both excited and intimidated him. That evening, after showing everything to his surprised but fascinated mom, Alex carefully examined the diary by the light of his desk lamp. Some pages were too water-damaged to read, but others were clear enough. The writing belonged to Eleanor Winters, a young woman who had lived in their town during the late 1930s. As he read, Alex felt as if he could hear Eleanor's voice across the decades telling her own story. And what a story it was turning out to be, full of secrets, hopes, and fears during a time when the world was changing rapidly and war was looming on the horizon. Mom, Alex called out, his voice filled with excitement. You won't believe what I'm reading. This is incredible. His mom appeared in the doorway, a curious look on her face. What have you found? Alex looked up, his eyes shining. A real mystery, and I think we need to solve it. The next morning, Alex woke up early, his mind still full of Eleanor Winters and her mysterious box. He'd stayed up late reading parts of the diary that were still legible, piecing together fragments of a life from long ago. His mom had been just as fascinated as he was. This is actually important historical material, she had said, carefully examining the photographs. These give us a glimpse of what life was like in this town during the 1930s. After breakfast, Mr. Chen arrived as promised, ready to take Alex and his mom to meet his wife's cousin at the Historical Society. I called Judy this morning, Mr. Chen explained as they drove downtown. She's very excited about your find, Alex. Says it might be quite significant for local history. The Historical Society was housed in an old Victorian building that had once been the town library. Alex had passed it many times but had never been inside. As they entered, he looked around in wonder at the glass display cases filled with old objects, the walls covered with black and white photographs, and the shelves lined with books and binders. A small woman with silver hair pulled back in a bun hurried toward them, her eyes bright with excitement. You must be Alex, she said warmly. I'm Judy Wilson. Thomas has told me about your amazing discovery. Alex carefully placed the box on a large table in a back room where Judy had led them. She put on a pair of white cotton gloves before touching anything. It's best to handle old papers and photos with gloves, she explained. The oils in our skin can damage them. She provided gloves for Alex and his mom too, making Alex feel like a real historian. Judy examined each item with great care and knowledge, occasionally making small sounds of surprise or interest. This diary is a real treasure, she said. From what I can see, it spans from 1937 to 1942. Crucial years in our history. She gently separated the photographs using special tools and techniques, revealing images that took Alex's breath away. There was Eleanor, a young woman with dark hair and a serious expression standing by the lake. Another showed her with a young man in what looked like a military uniform. They were smiling at each other in a way that made Alex feel like he was intruding on a private moment. Do you know who Eleanor Winters was? Alex asked eagerly. Judy nodded slowly. The name is certainly familiar. The Winters family was prominent in this town in the early 20th century. They owned the textile mill that employed half the town until it closed in the 1960s. She thought for a moment, but I don't recall much specific information about Eleanor herself. Let me check our records. While Judy disappeared into another room, Alex's mom carefully examined the letters. These are love letters, she said softly. From someone named Robert Miller to Eleanor. She looked up at Alex. They're quite beautiful, actually. He writes about how much he misses her, about the war in Europe and how he hopes to return to her soon. Alex felt a strange connection to these people from the past. They had walked the same streets he walked, seen the same lake, felt real emotions just like people today. Judy returned with several large books and folders. "Here we are," she said, opening one of the books to a marked page. Eleanor Winters, born 1918, daughter of Howard and Grace Winters. She worked as a secretary at her father's mill. Judy's finger moved down the page. "Oh, this is interesting. She was engaged to be married in 1942 to..." She paused. "Robert Miller, a soldier who was deployed overseas during World War II. "That's him," Alex exclaimed, pointing to the photograph of Eleanor with the young man. "Did they get married when he came back?" A shadow crossed Judy's face. "I'm afraid not, Alex. According to our records, Robert Miller never came back from the war. He was reported missing in action in 1943. The room fell silent. Alex felt a heaviness in his chest. These weren't just names in a history book or characters in a story. They were real people who had lived and loved and lost. "But there's something else here," Judy said, turning pages in another book. "This is from the town newspaper archives. In late 1942, there was some kind of scandal involving Robert Miller. He was accused of..." She hesitated, looking at Alex, then at his mom. "It's okay," his mom said. "Alex understands that history isn't always pleasant." Judy nodded. "Robert was accused of being a spy or having sympathies with the enemy. It says his family was German-American, and during that time there was a lot of suspicion and prejudice against anyone with German heritage." "But that's not fair," Alex protested. "Just because his family came from Germany doesn't mean he was a spy." "You're right," Judy said. "It wasn't fair at all. But during wartime, fear can make people do and believe terrible things." Alex thought about the box hidden in the mud by the lake. So Eleanor hid their letters and her diary to protect him? Because people were saying bad things about him? "That seems likely," Judy agreed. "From what I can piece together, Eleanor remained unmarried for the rest of her life. She continued working at the mill until it closed, then as a librarian until her retirement. She died in 1998 at the age of 80. She never forgot him," Alex's mom said softly. Alex felt tears prick at his eyes. The thought of Eleanor, an old lady working in the library, still holding on to the memory of Robert all those years. It made his heart hurt. But something else was bothering him. If Robert was accused of being a spy, was there ever any proof? Did they find out who really was the spy, if there was one? Judy shook her head. "I don't see anything here about that. It seems like one of those accusations that was never proven but never forgotten either. His reputation was ruined, and then he went off to war and never came back." Alex frowned, thinking hard. "Can we look at the letters and diary more carefully? Maybe there's something in there that could tell us what really happened." For the next hour, they carefully went through the materials, piece by piece. The diary entries were fascinating glimpses into daily life during wartime. Rationing, scrap metal drives, young men leaving for war. Eleanor wrote about her fear for Robert's safety and her anger at the accusations against him. Then, in one of the letters, Alex found something interesting. Robert had written, "I know who is passing information to foreign agents. I've seen the documents in his office. When I return, I will expose him for what he is and clear my name. Keep this letter hidden, Eleanor. Tell no one what I've told you. It's too dangerous." Alex's heart raced. "Look at this," he said, showing the others. Robert knew who the real spy was. But he never came back to tell anyone, his mom said. And Eleanor kept his secret all her life, Judy added. Probably to protect herself. If the real spy was someone powerful in town, it could have been dangerous for her to accuse him without proof. As they continued looking through the items, Alex noticed something odd about the golden heart pendant. "The locket seems thicker than it should be," he said, examining it closely. "Like there might be something inside." Judy carefully took the locket and examined it. "You're right. There's a tiny catch here. It's not just a pendant, it's a locket designed to open." With her gloved fingers, she delicately worked at the tiny mechanism. After several tense moments, there was a small click, and the heart opened. Inside, folded into an impossibly small square, was a piece of paper. "It's a note," Judy whispered, her voice trembling with excitement. She carefully unfolded it using small tweezers. The handwriting was tiny but clear. "The spy is PB and town council, access to shipping schedules." Has radio in basement. Proof in safe behind painting and study. PB? Alex's mom repeated. Who could that be? Judy's face had gone pale. Philip Bradford, she said. He was the head of the town council during the war years. Later became mayor. He was considered a town hero. There's even a statue of him in the park downtown. But he was the real spy? Alex asked, astonished. If what Robert wrote is true, Judy said, then yes. And he let an innocent man take the blame. The room fell silent again as they all considered the implications of what they had discovered. What do we do now? Alex finally asked. Philip Bradford is probably dead by now, right? Yes, he died in 1972, Judy confirmed. But his family is still prominent in town. His grandson is currently the mayor. We have to tell people the truth, Alex said firmly, for Robert's sake. And for Eleanor's. She kept this secret her whole life, probably because she was afraid. But now we can finally clear Robert's name. Mr. Chen, who had been quietly listening to everything, spoke up. This is bigger than just us now. This is about correcting a historical wrong. Alex's mom nodded. We need to be careful about how we present this. We have evidence, but it's still going to be shocking for the town, especially the Bradford family. Judy began gathering the materials carefully. I'm going to document everything properly and call the Historical Society Board for an emergency meeting. This is the kind of discovery that changes how we understand our town's history. As they prepared to leave, Alex took one last look at the photograph of Eleanor and Robert together. They looked so happy, unaware of the tragedy that awaited them. He felt a deep responsibility to them both, to make sure their story was finally told correctly. We'll make it right, he whispered to the smiling couple in the faded photograph. I promise. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Judy had called an emergency meeting of the Historical Society Board, and by Monday afternoon, Alex found himself sitting nervously in a room full of adults who all seemed both excited and troubled by his discovery. This is extraordinary material, said the board president, a tall man with glasses who had introduced himself as Dr. Walker. If authentic and preliminary, examination suggests it is. This could significantly change our understanding of local history during the war years. Alex watched as the board members carefully examined the box's contents. They had brought in a document specialist from the university in the next town over, who confirmed that the paper, ink, and handwriting were consistent with the 1940s era. What about Robert's accusation? Alex asked, unable to contain himself any longer. The note that says Philip Bradford was the real spy? The room grew quiet. Dr. Walker cleared his throat. That's the most sensitive part of this discovery. The Bradford family has been prominent in this town for generations. Making such an accusation public, even about events from over 80 years ago, will have serious repercussions. But if it's true, don't people deserve to know? Alex's mom asked. A man's reputation was destroyed unfairly. He died with that cloud over his name. We need more evidence, said another board member. Something more substantial than a note hidden in a locket. Judy spoke up. Robert mentioned in his letter that there was proof in Bradford's safe, behind a painting in his study. The Bradford house is still standing, Dr. Walker said thoughtfully. It's been converted into the Bradford Museum and Cultural Center. It's maintained by the Town Historical Trust. Alex's eyes widened. So the study might still be there? Maybe even the safe? Possibly, Dr. Walker agreed. But we can't just go tearing apart the walls of a historical building on the basis of a note. Maybe we don't have to, Judy suggested. The Bradford house was extensively documented when it was turned into a museum. There might be photographs or renovation records that show if there was a safe behind any paintings. The board agreed to research this angle discreetly. They also decided to try to locate any surviving relatives of Robert Miller, who might have additional information or family stories about the incident. What about Eleanor? Alex asked. Did she have any family? She had a niece who moved away years ago, Judy said. I'll try to track her down. As the meeting concluded, Dr. Walker turned to Alex. Young man, your discovery has opened up a significant historical mystery, but I want you to understand that we need to proceed carefully and responsibly. Historical reputations and living descendants are at stake. Alex nodded, feeling the weight of the situation. This was bigger than finding treasure or solving a puzzle. This was about real people's lives and legacies. On Wednesday, Judy called with news. "We found something," she said, her voice crackling with excitement over the phone. In the architectural plans filed when the Bradford house was renovated in 1986, there's a notation about removing a wall safe in the study. It was behind a large painting, just as Robert described. "Did they say what was in it?" Alex asked eagerly. "No, the plans only mention that it was removed. But here's the interesting part. The renovation was overseen by Harold Bradford, Philip's son. So he might have found whatever was in the safe," Alex's mom said, listening in on the call. "Exactly. And there's more. I managed to contact Eleanor's niece, Lisa Thompson. She lives in Arizona now, but she remembers her aunt well. She's flying in tomorrow to see the box and its contents." The next day, Alex met Lisa Thompson at the Historical Society. She was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes that reminded Alex a bit of Eleanor's in the photographs. When she saw the box and its contents, tears filled her eyes. "Aunt Eleanor never talked much about her past," Lisa said, carefully touching the diary. "But she always wore this locket. She told me once it contained her heart's deepest secret, but I never knew what she meant. Now I understand." Lisa confirmed what they had pieced together, that Eleanor had remained devoted to Robert's memory throughout her life. She never married, never even dated as far as I know. She would get quiet around Veterans Day and Memorial Day. Now I know why. "Did she ever mention anything about Robert being accused of spying, or about Philip Bradford?" Alex asked. Lisa thought for a moment. "She never spoke directly about it, but I remember once when I was a teenager, we were walking downtown and passed by Bradford Park where his statue is. She stopped and just stared at it with such anger in her eyes. When I asked her what was wrong, she just said, 'Some people build their greatness on other people's suffering.' I never forgot that." That afternoon, they received another piece of news. One of the Historical Society volunteers had found a collection of old newspaper articles about the Bradford family. Among them was a small mention that in 1946, a year after the war ended, Philip Bradford had made a substantial donation to rebuild the town hall, which had nearly bankrupted the town during the Depression. The source of his sudden wealth was never explained. "Government contracts during wartime could make people rich," Judy explained to Alex, "but so could selling information to the enemy." By Friday, word had begun to spread through town about the discovery and the questions it raised about Philip Bradford. The current mayor, George Bradford, requested a meeting with the Historical Society board. Mayor Bradford was a man in his 50s with the same square jaw and stern expression as his grandfather in the old photographs. He did not look pleased. "These allegations against my grandfather are preposterous," he said, his voice tight with anger. "Philip Bradford was a war hero who served this town faithfully for decades. To suggest he was a traitor based on a love-struck soldier's jealous accusations is absurd and potentially libelous." Dr. Walker remained calm. "Mayor Bradford, we understand your concern. No formal accusations have been made. We're simply researching historical documents that have recently come to light. And I understand there's a boy involved in all this." The mayor's gaze swept the room until it landed on Alex, who tried not to squirm in his chair. "I just found the box," Alex said, his voice coming out smaller than he intended. "I didn't know what was inside or what it would mean." The mayor's expression softened slightly. "Well, young man, you've certainly stirred up a hornet's nest." He turned back to the board. "I want to make it clear that the Bradford family will not stand for any defamation of my grandfather's character without substantial proof. A note and some letters from a soldier who was already under suspicion are hardly conclusive evidence." After the mayor left, Alex felt deflated. "Maybe we're wrong," he said to his mom as they walked home. "Maybe Robert was mistaken or lying to protect himself." His mom put her arm around his shoulders. "Or maybe he was telling the truth and the proof just hasn't been found yet. Either way, you did the right thing by bringing this to light. History isn't always neat and tidy, Alex. Sometimes it's messy and uncomfortable, especially when it challenges what we thought we knew." The next day, a surprising visitor arrived at Alex's house, Lisa Thompson, Eleanor's niece. She was carrying a small worn leather suitcase. "After our meeting yesterday, I remembered something," she said once they were seated in the living room. "When Aunt Eleanor died, she left me a suitcase full of old papers and photographs. I kept it all these years but never went through it carefully. Last night at the hotel I opened it up and I found these." She pulled out a bundle of papers tied with faded blue ribbon. "These are letters that Robert sent to my aunt after he was deployed." The military censors would have read his mail, so he couldn't write openly about the spying accusation. But look at this one. She handed Alex a letter dated March 1943, just weeks before Robert was reported missing. The handwriting was hurried, as if written in haste. My dearest Eleanor, I cannot say much, but know that I have not given up on clearing my name. A fellow soldier here, Jim Parker, is from our town and his father worked at the docks. He has confirmed what I suspected about PB and the shipping information. Parker Sr. kept records of all unusual requests for shipping schedules, dates, times, cargo. He was suspicious but afraid to speak up. Jim has these records and will bring them home after deployment. If anything happens to me, find Jim. The truth will come out. Forever yours, Robert. Alex looked up, his heart racing. Jim Parker. Did he survive the war? Lisa nodded, a smile spreading across her face. That's what I spent this morning finding out. James Parker returned from the war in 1945. He lived in our town until his death in 1989. And here's the best part. His son, Frank Parker, still lives here. He's in his 70s now, so he might have his father's records, Alex exclaimed. There's only one way to find out, Lisa said. I have his address. Alex looked at his mom, excitement building inside him again. Can we go talk to him, please? His mom hesitated only briefly before nodding. I'll drive. This is a mystery that needs solving, not just for history's sake, but for Robert and Eleanor too. As they got into the car, Alex thought about everything that had happened since he spotted that glint of metal by the lake. He had set out that Saturday morning hoping to find interesting rocks or bugs to photograph. Instead, he had uncovered a decades-old mystery, a love story cut short by war, and possibly a truth that had been buried for nearly a century. And now, they might finally have the proof they needed to set things right. Frank Parker lived in a small house on the edge of town, with a well-kept garden and a front porch lined with potted plants. As Alex, his mom, and Lisa walked up the steps, Alex felt a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. What if Frank didn't have the records? What if Robert had been wrong all along? A tall older man with white hair and friendly eyes answered the door. He listened patiently as Lisa explained who they were and why they had come. His expression grew more serious as she mentioned Philip Bradford and the accusations of spying. You'd better come in, he said, holding the door open wider. I've been waiting for someone to ask about this for most of my life. The inside of Frank's house was filled with books and photographs. He led them to a small study and gestured for them to sit down. My father rarely talked about the war, Frank began, settling into an old armchair. But there was one story he told me when I was about your age. He nodded at Alex. About a fellow soldier named Robert Miller who was falsely accused of being a traitor. Alex leaned forward eagerly. Did your father have evidence? Records about Philip Bradford? Frank nodded slowly. Dad worked at the docks before enlisting, helping his father, who was the shipping manager. They noticed something odd about Bradford's requests for shipping schedules, always for vessels carrying military supplies or troop movements. My grandfather started keeping copies of all these requests, noting the dates and times. Do you still have these records? Lisa asked, her voice tense with hope. I do, Frank said. Dad kept them all these years, along with letters from Robert. After the war, Dad tried to bring this information to light, but Bradford had become too powerful by then. No one would listen, and some even suggested Dad might face the same accusations Robert had. With a wife and young child, me, he eventually gave up and locked it all away. Frank went to an old desk in the corner and unlocked the bottom drawer. From it, he pulled out a thick manila envelope yellowed with age. When Dad died, he made me promise to keep these safe. Someday, he said, someone will want to know the truth. I guess that day has finally come. With trembling hands, he passed the envelope to Lisa. Inside were dozens of papers, shipping requests with Philip Bradford's signature, notes in a cramped handwriting detailing unusual patterns, and several letters from Robert to Jim Parker discussing their suspicions. There's something else, Frank said, reaching back into the drawer. He pulled out an old journal. This is my grandfather's diary from 1942-1945. In it, he documents overhearing Bradford on a radio late at night, speaking in German. The house next to Bradford's was being renovated, and my grandfather was doing some of the electrical work. He was in the basement and could hear Bradford through the shared wall. Alex looked at all the evidence spread out on the coffee table. It seemed overwhelming, definitive. Philip Bradford, the town hero, had indeed been a spy during World War II and had let an innocent man take the blame. "We need to take this to the Historical Society right away," his mom said. But Frank held up his hand. "Before you do, there's one more person you should talk to. My father wasn't the only one who tried to expose Bradford after the war. There was a young reporter named David Thompson who investigated the case in 1947. Bradford used his influence to get him fired and run out of town. David is still alive. He's 99 years old and lives at the Sunny Pines retirement home on the north side of town." An hour later, they were sitting in a bright common room at Sunny Pines talking with David Thompson. Despite his age, his mind was sharp and his eyes lit up when they mentioned Robert Miller and Philip Bradford. "I've been waiting 78 years for someone to ask me about this," he said, his voice thin but clear. Bradford was definitely passing information to German agents. "I tracked down 3 people who had seen him meeting with a known German sympathizer in the next town over. But when I tried to publish my findings, Bradford threatened my family. He had become wealthy and powerful after the war, some of that money likely paid by German intelligence." David reached for a cane propped against his chair. "If you'll follow me to my room, I have something to show you." In his small but tidy room, David pulled out a battered leather briefcase from under his bed. From it, he took a folder containing old newspaper clippings, notes, and a stack of photographs. "I kept investigating privately, even after I was forced to leave town. These photos show Bradford meeting with a man later arrested as a German spy. I was never able to use them, but I kept them all these years, hoping someday the truth would come out." By the time they left Sunny Pines, Alex felt like they were carrying a time bomb. The combined evidence from Eleanor's box, Jim Parker's records, and David Thompson's investigation was overwhelming. Philip Bradford had betrayed his country, and Robert Miller had paid the price. The next morning, they presented everything to the Historical Society board. The room was silent as the members examined the evidence. Even Dr. Walker seemed at a loss for words. "This is conclusive," he finally said. "We need to inform the mayor." Mayor Bradford arrived within the hour, his face dark with anger until he saw the mountain of evidence laid out before him. As he read through the documents, his expression changed from disbelief to shock and finally, to a deep sadness. "I grew up hearing stories about my grandfather's service to this town," he said quietly. "He was my hero." He looked up, his eyes wet. "But this evidence is undeniable. He betrayed not just his country, but this town and the people who trusted him. And he let an innocent man take the blame." In the days that followed, the story broke across the town and then the nation. News crews descended on the small town to cover the revelation of a decades-old espionage case and the clearing of Robert Miller's name. Mayor Bradford, to his credit, did not try to bury the truth. In a public statement, he acknowledged his grandfather's crimes and announced that Bradford Park would be renamed Miller Memorial Park in honor of Robert. The statue of Philip Bradford would be removed, and in its place, a new monument would stand, one that told the true story of Robert Miller and Eleanor Winters. 2 weeks after the day Alex had found the box by the lake, a small ceremony was held at the Historical Society. The mayor presented Alex with a special commendation for his role in uncovering the truth. But more meaningful to Alex was meeting several elderly veterans who had served with Robert, who came to thank him for clearing their friend's name. Most touching of all was when a group of Miller relatives, located through genealogical research, arrived from across the country. Robert's great-nephew, a man in his 50s who bore a striking resemblance to the young soldier in the photographs, hugged Alex with tears in his eyes. "Our family always believed in Robert's innocence," he said, "but we could never prove it. You've given us back our family honor." As fall turned to winter, the story began to fade from the national headlines, but its impact on the town remained. The Bradford family, after the initial shock, donated a significant sum to establish a scholarship in Robert Miller's name. The Historical Society created a special exhibit featuring Eleanor's box and its contents, along with the evidence that had finally revealed the truth. For Alex, life gradually returned to normal. School, weekends at the lake, taking photographs of nature. But he was different now. His adventure had shown him that history wasn't just names and dates and textbooks. It was made up of real people with hopes, dreams, secrets, and sorrows. He understood now how the past connects to the present, how old injustices can be set right, and how one curious discovery could change everything. On a cold Saturday in December, Alex walked alone to the newly renamed Miller Memorial Park. The monument was finished, a simple stone marker with the photographs of Robert and Eleanor embedded in it, protected by glass. Beneath the photos was a plaque that read, "In memory of Robert Miller, who served his country with honor, and Eleanor Winters, who kept faith with the truth. Justice delayed is not always justice denied." Alex placed a small bouquet of flowers at the base of the monument. As he straightened up, he noticed an elderly woman watching him from a nearby bench. "You're the boy who found the box, aren't you?" she asked. Alex nodded. She smiled. "I knew Eleanor a long time ago. She was my librarian when I was about your age. She was always kind, but so sad. I think she would be at peace now, knowing that Robert's name has been cleared. And I think she would be very grateful to you." As the woman walked away, Alex looked again at the photographs of the young couple who had been separated by war and lies, but were now remembered together. Their story finally told in full. "I was just in the right place at the right time," Alex said softly to their images. "But I'm glad I found you." He turned and headed home through the quiet streets of a town that now knew its true history, all because a boy was walking by a lake and saw something curious.